At the time, I was 19 years old and lived with my mother in an apartment on the third floor of an old building in the center of the city. It was a quiet place, but kind of gloomy, with that 70s building vibe, full of dark corners and narrow corridors. I was in my bedroom, a small room with faded blue walls and a window that looked out onto the back alley of the building. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was playing video games, completely immersed in that lazy weekend routine. My mother, Claire, had gone out shopping at the market, as she did almost every weekend. She always complained about the pain in her legs after walking for hours through the supermarket aisles, but she never stopped going. It was something she did religiously. About an hour after she left, I heard the front door unlock. The sound of the key turning in the lock was familiar, but something at that moment made me stop and pay attention. I heard footsteps in the hallway, light but clear, as if someone was trying not to make noise. Then, right outside my door, I heard a voice that I immediately recognized. It was my mother's voice. "I'm home, I'm going to lie down," she said, in that tired tone I knew so well. I replied, "Okay," and continued in my room without thinking much about it. Half an hour passed, and I began to wonder if she still wanted to go to the movies, as we had agreed before she left. I took out my cell phone and sent a message. "Are we still going to the movies?" That's when everything changed. In a matter of seconds, she responded with a selfie. In the photo, she was clearly still at the market, with shopping bags in her cart and the fluorescent lights of the supermarket in the background. My heart stopped for a moment, and then it started beating fast, as if it wanted to get out of my chest. If she was there all the time, who had entered the house? And more importantly, who or what had spoken to me? I was paralyzed for a few seconds, trying to process what was happening. My room, which once seemed cozy, suddenly turned into a claustrophobic place. The daylight was beginning to fade, and the shadows on the walls seemed to move, as if they were alive. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down, but fear had already settled in the back of my mind. I decided I needed to investigate. After all, maybe I had heard it wrong, or maybe it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew it was nothing like that. Something was wrong, very wrong. Carefully, I opened the door to my room and looked down the hallway. It was empty, but the silence was heavy, as if the air was charged with something I couldn't see. The door to my mother's room was ajar, and I could see part of the unmade bed, as if someone had recently lain there. My stomach churned, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I advanced slowly, each step echoing on the aged wooden floor. The hallway seemed longer than usual, as if the apartment had suddenly expanded. I reached the door of my mother's room and pushed her slowly, hoping to see something or someone inside. But the room was empty. The bed was unmade, as if someone had recently lain there. I looked around, looking for any sign that anyone had been there, but there was nothing. Just the silence and the feeling that I wasn't alone. I went back into the hallway and looked toward the living room. The front door was closed. The lock seemed intact, with no signs of break-in. So how had anyone gotten in? I decided to check out the rest of the apartment. The kitchen was empty, as was the bathroom. Everything seemed normal, except for a strange sensation in the air, as if something invisible was watching me. I felt exposed, like I was being followed by something I couldn't see. When I returned to the hallway, I heard a noise coming from my mother's room. It was a low, almost imperceptible sound, like someone whispering. My heart raced again, and I felt a chill run through my body. I went to the room again, but the sound stopped as soon as I entered. I looked around, looking for anything that might have caused the noise, but there was nothing. The window was closed, and there was no wind outside. It was then that I noticed something strange. The blanket on the bed was slightly crumpled, as if someone had quickly gotten up. I knew my mother wasn't home, so who had laid there? And more importantly, where was that person or thing now? I looked around, feeling the weight of silence again. The apartment seemed bigger, darker, as if the walls were closing around me. I decided I needed to get out of there, even if it was just to breathe a little. I went to get my keys. They were not in the place they always were. So I went to the front door. But when I tried to open it, I realized that it was locked. I thought it was strange. My mother never locked the door when she left, because she only opened from the inside. I tried to turn the handle hard, but it wouldn't move, as if it was stuck. My heart raced again, how the door could be locked from the inside. I walked back into the hallway, feeling panic rise inside me. I looked at the living room window, thinking about going out that way, but we were on the 3rd floor. It was not an option. It was then that I heard the sound again, coming from my mother's room. This time it was clearer, a low whisper, almost like distant music. My body froze, but I knew I had to face whatever it was. I grabbed a bench that was in the living room, as if that could protect me, and went towards the bedroom. When I entered, the sound stopped, but something in the atmosphere of the room had changed. The air was colder, and the late afternoon light coming in through the window seemed dimmer, as if something was blocking part of it. I looked at the bed and saw that the blanket was even more untidy, as if someone had moved there recently. My eyes were drawn to the closet in the corner of the room. The door was ajar, and I could have sworn I had seen something move inside. My pulse quickened, and I approached slowly, holding the seat tightly. When I got closer, I heard a low creak, as if the closet door was opening on its own. With my heart beating so hard that I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears, I approached the closet. The door was slowly opening, as if something or someone was pushing her from the inside. I held the bench tighter, prepared to defend myself, but when the door opened completely, there was nothing there. Only my mother's clothes hung motionless, and a few boxes piled on the floor. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things, but the feeling that something was wrong only grew. It was then that I heard the sound again. This time it came from behind me. It was a clear whisper, almost like someone calling my name. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. The bed, the closet, the curtains swaying slightly in the breeze that came in through the half-open window. Everything seemed normal except for that voice. It was soft, almost comforting, but at the same time it caused me deep discomfort. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only the echo of my own question in the silent room. I decided that I needed to get out of there, no matter what the cost. I went back into the living room and tried the front door again, but it was still locked. I looked out the window, hoping to see someone on the street who could help me, but the alley was deserted. It was then that I remembered the back door, which led to the service area. Maybe I could go out there. I ran to the kitchen, but when I got there, the back door was also locked. Even worse, the keys that normally hung on the hook next to the door were also gone. At that moment, I heard footsteps behind me. They were light but unmistakable. Someone was in the kitchen with me. I turned slowly, holding the bench like a gun, and saw a figure standing on the threshold of the door. She was a woman, but she wasn't my mother. She had long, dark hair, and her face was partially hidden by the shadows. She wore a brown dress, faded and dirty, as if she had been buried. For years. She didn't say anything, just stood there staring at me with empty eyes. My body froze and I couldn't move. Then she took a step towards me, and I finally reacted, screaming and throwing the bench in her direction. After the figure disappeared, I stood in the kitchen, holding my head tightly, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My heart was still beating fast, and I felt a chill running down my spine. I decided that I needed to stay calm and wait for my mother to arrive. Meanwhile, I heard more noises around the house, footsteps in the hallway, furniture being dragged into the living room, whispers coming from places I couldn't identify. Every sound made me shudder, but I saw nothing. It was as if the house was alive, trying to scare me. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back to the wall, holding the bench as if it were my only protection. The noises continued for a while, but I didn't have the courage to investigate again. I stood there counting the minutes until my mother arrived. When I finally heard the key turning in the lock on the front door, I felt immense relief. The door opened and my mother entered, carrying the shopping bags. She looked at me with concern. "What happened? You look pale." I didn't know where to start, but I tried to explain what had happened, even though I knew it would sound absurd. She listened to me in silence, but I could see that she was skeptical. "You must have imagined things, dear. Maybe it was the wind or the building making." strange noises, as it always does. I wanted to believe that, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Still, with her at home, the atmosphere seemed lighter. The noises stopped, and the house returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. But I couldn't forget the feeling that something, or someone, had been there with me. Over time, the routine returned to normal, but the feeling of being watched never completely disappeared. To this day, I'm not sure what happened that day. My mom and I still avoid talking about it, as if mentioning the event might bring something back. Still, I can't ignore the details that don't make sense. My mother's voice, the woman who appeared, in front of me, all the noises. After I remembered the cameras, I spent several nights reviewing the recordings, looking for any sign of movement, but it was always the same, an empty, silent hallway. On one particularly long night, however, I noticed something that made me uneasy. At the exact moment the woman appeared, the video recorded a slight tremor in the camera, as if something had passed through there too fast to be captured, and it didn't have her image, only mine. Since then, the house has never been the same for me. I changed rooms and I always sleep with a light on. My mother, on the other hand, seems to have overcome it better than I have. She says that as long as nothing else happens, we should move on. But I do know that something entered that house that day, something that played with my perception and our safety. Today I share this story here because I still wonder if anyone else has gone through something similar. Could it be that this happens more often than we realize, but people just ignore it or forget it? Or was I just the unlucky one who experienced something that should never have happened? Be that as it may, every strange sound or unexpected shadow reminds me of that day. And the question that torments me the most remains unanswered. What was really in my house? Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.